בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ.
As you're getting ready for the fall feasts, part of what you may want to do is take an inventory of who you are. And in the Jewish literature, tradition, whatever you want to say, they have a process called Musar, which means ethics, and it provides a structured, systematic way of figuring out who you are. They divide character into the 13 attributes that I've got up there on the slide. And let me read these off for you. Humility, gratitude, patience, honor, generosity, kindness, strength, tranquility, trust, enthusiasm, order, awareness, and truth. And by the way, Musar is very old. It's not something modern. And the idea from Musar is everybody comes into this world imperfect. We go out of this world imperfect. But in between, what you want to do is you want to get better at who you are. So as you look at these, the continuum is from left to right, and then I've got what I call a slider in between, which is the yellow. And the way to think of this is that the blue is opaque and the yellow is transparent. And the idea is you've got the light of God up above, and what you want to do is you want to get yourself so that you're not blocking that light. So let me show you what that conceptually would look like. What I've got here is conceptual diagram of the transparent parts of your personality sort of lined up so that the light of God can work through you, is the idea here. And if your sliders are out of balance, what happens is people can't see God because you get in the way. So, for example, let's say that you have a problem with patience. And if you're dealing with somebody and you're just really impatient and you just can't get anything done because of your impatience and you're not able to concentrate on them or any of those kinds of things, your impatience gets in the way of you ministering to that person. And each one of those is that way. Let's take a look at truth. If you can't be depended upon to tell the truth, and people can't trust you, your lack of truthfulness gets in the way of being able to minister to somebody. Now, you'll notice that God's light line up and down is in the middle, which means that I've got stuff on both sides. Furthermore, you'll notice that each of those bands is a different size. So this is not a mathematically precise procedure. There is a range of each of those attributes within which you can be perfectly useful to God. But it is not necessary that everybody be lined up with military precision. So let's take truth for a minute. And notice I haven't labeled the ends of the spectrum. What would be positive and negative on that spectrum of truth? One end is not being able to tell the truth at all, lying. What's the other end? You're so blunt you offend people. So truth then is a spectrum. And where you want to be is somewhere toward the middle, so that people can depend on what you say, that what you're saying is the truth, but you're also not so blunt that nobody will ever talk to you. And all of this is the same way. So go up to order. On one end is chaos. You look at my desk, and my desk is pretty chaotic. And people do not dare try and straighten my desk up, because I can find anything on my desk, but nobody else can. And it bothers some neat people, but she's learned to live with it. She just put me in the basement and it's okay. Now the other side of order is what we would call OCD, where You just freak when anything is out of place. So again, you want to be somewhere on that spectrum, not so disorderly that you bother people and they won't speak to you, and not so OCD that nobody can stand to be around you because you're always at them for something that's out of place. So the idea here is balance, not precision. And each one of these traits has that spectrum. What Musar does is it gives you a systematic procedure to inventory yourself with respect to each one of these attributes. Starts off with humility, which is the one at the top. And it gives you some exercises. It takes about a week where you can go through your life and you can figure out where you fall on the humility spectrum. Now, humility on one end of the spectrum is, boy, I am so worthless. I'm just not good for anything. I can't imagine why anybody would even talk to me. I'm so worthless. That's negative humility. Positive humility is, look at me. I'm the hottest thing in the room. Look at me. So, again, it's a spectrum. Having no self-worth is no good. Having too much self-worth is no good. You want to be in a normal range. And the way I've drawn these, notice humility, you're sort of barely okay in humility. And that's okay, because you're not getting in people's way. So there's a range of every character trait within which you're not getting in God's way. So if your sliders, as I call them, are sort of lined up like this so that people can deal with you and they can see God's light through you, you're fine. You don't have to work to get that last quarter of a bar centered. So if we look at our previous one, the person who is represented by this slide has got a problem either with pride or low self-worth. As I say, I have deliberately not labeled these. He also has a problem with generosity. Maybe he's too generous. Maybe he's one of these people that gives things away beyond what is healthy. Or maybe he's just a tightwad. It could be either way. But if you need something from this person and you go to him, that person's generosity is going to get in the way of what God would like to do. Now notice the other part of that is this is situational. So if you're dealing with that person and generosity is not on the table because you don't need anything or so forth, then the fact that this person has a generosity problem is not a problem in that transaction. So you may be looking for somebody who you can trust. And this guy's pretty trustworthy. And the fact that he's not generous doesn't enter into your transaction. So in that particular case, it's not a problem. But at some point, it will be a problem because he's out of balance. The object of the exercise is not to perfect you for you. Although if you do get your sliders lined up, your life will in fact go better. But that's not the object of the exercise. The object of the exercise is so that you are not that SOB that drives people away from God because of who you are. How many people do you know? Well, if that's a Christian, I don't want to be one. And the idea here is to get yourself sort of in balance so people don't get that reaction from you. Once you get things sort of in balance, then your life, in fact, does go better. This is not something that you're doing just for God. The other thing to understand is if your sliders are out of balance, welcome to the human race. Everybody starts off life out of balance. So the fact that your sliders are out of balance is not sinful. It can lead to sin, but the fact that you come out of your mother imbalanced, everybody does. That's part of the design. So what the Musar course does by taking you through each one of them, it enables you to say, I got a real problem with trustworthiness. That's something I need to work on. And that then becomes a curriculum, not a source of condemnation. So if going through the exercises you discover that you've got a problem with one of these things, then what it does is it gives you some exercises so you can work on getting that in balance. So most of your sliders are going to be in the acceptable range. And you're not going to have to spend a lot of time, other than doing the inventory and saying, oh, okay, that one seems to be okay. But as I say, you'll find 2 or 3 of them that are slammed clear over to the left or the right. That's where I need to spend my time working. It is not by way of condemning anybody. It is simply by way of enabling you to direct your efforts to the place where they will be more productive. And by the way, these are all scriptural, and the exercises all tie into Scripture. It is not pop psychology 101. Now, the next thing I want to take you through real quickly is what your problem is. I've got a block diagram of a human being, and the little cloud off to the right represents God, spiritual world, or however you want to describe it. Most people have heard that people are body, soul, and spirit. The spirit is your connection to God. The body is your connection to the clay. And in between, you got the soul, which is where the action is. So I'm going to break this down, and by the way, this is all biblical. God, in fact, describes us this way. What I've done is I've taken the soul and I have broken it out, if you will. The soul is composed here of what I have got 3 parts. And the ruach, which literally also means breath, again, just like neshama means breath, different words, but they are both translated as breath. The ruach is the part that keeps the meat warm. And the example I use, I'm holding my hand out horizontally, and I'm looking at my hand and I'm saying, hand, I want you to move, turn over, move, move. I said move, do it. Notice nothing has happened. I can't tell you what I just did, but my hand is now flipped over. The part that controls that is what's labeled as the ruach. And in computerese, that would be a hardware interface layer. What that does is it translates my wanting to move my hand into the muscles properly firing to have that happen. That's what I call the ruach. Now, I've got 2 other boxes inside of this box that I've labeled the soul. One is labeled the nephesh and one is labeled the conscious mind. And the way I would describe it is the conscious mind is what you think you believe. The nephesh, or the unconscious mind, is what you actually believe. And the thing about the conscious mind is you have access to it. That's what you're using as you're listening to me and you're thinking about what I'm saying, and that's what I'm using as I'm talking to you and all that kind of stuff. The bigger one is the nephesh, and that's the stuff that you don't have direct access to. I've now got the same diagram, except I've added another cloud. I've got the white cloud representing God, and I've got the green cloud representing the world. So the neshama up here interacts with the white cloud, and the body down there interacts with the green cloud, because that's what you work with. Now, what I've got is the neshama, the nephesh, the conscious, and the ruach over on the left side, and I've got some arrows. I've got arrows between the conscious and the neshama and the conscious and the ruach. And those are lightweight yellow arrows. And then between the nephesh and the neshama and the ruach are big, heavy, red arrows. Let's start with the lightweight yellow ones, between your conscious mind and the neshama or the ruach. What that is willpower. So if I'm praying to God, which I do, I'm operating on the yellow lines. If I am trying to decide what I want to do, I want to pick this up. I just did. Okay, I'm operating on the yellow lines because I'm doing what I want to do. The nephesh, however, those lines represent what I would call habit and belief. So, for example, let's say I were still a smoker. So when I'm trying to give up smoking, I am operating on the yellow lines. My body, however, is operating on the red lines. So until I actually break that habit, the yellow lines of my free will, if you will routinely get overpowered by the red lines of my nephesh. Give you another example. Let's say one of your problems is generosity. And you said, all right, God says I have got to be more generous. I am going to be more generous. I am going to start giving. And the first time you come to Shabbat, you give. And then next week, something just comes up. And, gee, I don't have that money. And by the end of about 6 months, your generosity will be right back to where it was before. And what that is your nephesh is not generous. And what it will do is it will sabotage you and get you back to wherever it wants to be. Now, I am talking about the nephesh negatively here, because I'm talking about it in the sense that it's something that you need to overcome. It's also good. I mean, God built it into you because you need it. It's your stability. It's the thing that keeps you stable. And the problem with it is it may be keeping you stable doing things that you really don't want to do. Most of what it keeps you stable doing is just fine. But there are going to be things that it's keeping you stable doing that you really would rather not be doing. So the question then becomes, how do you change your nephesh so that it in fact becomes stable in the new behavior that you want to achieve? That's what Musar does. The Jews have a saying, don't tell me what you believe. Let me watch you for a while and I'll tell you what you believe. Because what observation will tell you, if you're paying attention, is what's programmed into your nephesh. And you can blow whatever smoke you want, but if I watch you for a while, I'll be able to tell. So what Musar then does is it tells you how to communicate with your nephesh and how to get it to do what your conscious mind and the Word of God says you want it to do. And that's the whole point of Musar. It has exercises where you keep track of what you're actually doing, as opposed to what you think you're doing. And as you go through that, you will at the end of that time say, I always thought I was really pretty truthful. I'm not. So that's something I need to work on. And again, this is not a condemnation exercise. This is by way of developing a curriculum so that you have a plan for moving your sliders toward balance. It does not respond to right and wrong. It responds to true and false. True and false and right and wrong are different orthogonal axes. Right and wrong are moral questions. Is this something that God approves of or not? Is this right or is this wrong? Nephesh doesn't care about that. Your conscious mind handles that. Nephesh does not care about right and wrong. What the nephesh wants to know is this true of me or is this not true of me? So what you need to do is you need to talk to the nephesh, not in terms of this is right and wrong, but in terms of is this true or false? And this is true of me, but I don't want it to be true of me anymore, so how do I make it not true of me? And then once the nephesh becomes convinced that X is either true of you or not true of you, then the nephesh takes over, and it will be just as difficult to break as smoking is. We think of it as a problem when it's doing something we don't want to do. But really, it's designed by God because it is your stability. The trick is to find out those areas in which you are stable in what you believe are pathological ways, and then change your stability. There's a website, if you want to pursue this further, JewishPathways.com. If you go there, on the home page, there are a bunch of courses listed. Some of them are for pay. Musar is free. So down at the bottom right-hand corner, you have the Musar program. You click on that, you've got to join, which means you got to give them your email address. But after that, it's free. And they have a week's worth of exercises for each one of these personality attributes.
Elohim, et